When I think about it now, I think about how it all sort of started. We just had this dream, and we thought, well, what do we want to be famous for? It turns out it was the songwriting. And I think everything we set out to do, we did, against all odds. I can't honestly come to terms with the fact that they're not here anymore.
Barry Gibb has never done this before, never taken the long walk to the stage by himself.
Is it important for you to do this?
Yeah, it's everything to me. It's all I've ever known. I don't know how to do anything else. So,
You do this one pretty well, though.
I can't get a job.
He's the only surviving member of one of the 20th century's greatest vocal groups. And this night, at the TD Garden in Boston, he's about to begin his first ever solo tour. The last of the Bee Gees is going.
Over 220 million records sold, a falsetto that defined a generation, and a reality that no chart position or award can erase. Barry Gibb is the last Gibb brother standing. He's sung Stayin' Alive for crowds of tens of thousands more times than most people eat breakfast, yet surviving hasn't brought relief. It's brought questions, guilt, and a sense of emptiness that fame can't fix. Every hit single, every sold-out arena carries the echo of his brother's voices, reminding him of what's gone. In this video, we're revealing the pain of a man navigating life as the keeper of a legacy built on harmony, heartbreak, and survival.
There you are. And I always said to Romano, you know, the dream came true. Stop, sit down and enjoy it.
When you see Barry Gibb on stage today, it's easy to forget that he was once just one of four brothers, all sharing the spotlight, all carrying the weight of the music together. These days, when the lights go up and the first chords of Stayin' Alive ring out, Barry often admits that he can't help but glance to his left, as if expecting to see Robin with that familiar towel tossed over his shoulder, or Morris holding down the rhythm on bass, with that calm, steady energy that grounded the whole group. The crowd is there, the applause is there, but what he feels most strongly is who isn't there anymore. And that's the thing about Barry's performances now. They aren't just concerts, they're a kind of memory exercise, almost like he's sharing ghosts with the audience. Sometimes he lets the fans take over a chorus, not because he can't hit the note, but because hearing thousands of people sing it back makes it feel a little less lonely, like Robin and Morris are in the room again. Off stage, he still carries reminders of them everywhere. If you look closely, you'll notice he signs autographs with his left hand while his right hand clutches a plectrum, the kind of pick guitarists use. But this one has three initials etched on it, M, R, and A. That's Morris, Robin, and Andy, the brothers who aren't there to share the spotlight anymore. It's the same way their dad used to scratch their initials onto guitars, so in a way, Barry's just continuing a family tradition. People might assume it's a little show of sentiment for the fans, but for Barry, it's much heavier. He's still out there smiling for selfies, receiving Lifetime Achievement Awards, and even taking on tours when he could just as easily retire. But none of that cancels out the private reality he wakes up with every day. He's the last one left, the last Gibb brother still carrying the music, and that question never really leaves him. Why was he the one who survived when the others didn't? That question becomes even heavier when you remember how deep the bond between the brothers really was.
It all the way through?
No.
Why not?
Because I can't handle watching the loss of my family. I just can't handle it. It's not. Who would? I think it's perfectly normal to not want to see how each brother was lost, you know?
If you go all the way back to the 1950s, before the white suits, flashing lights, and sold-out stadiums, the Gibb brothers were just three kids trying to make music out of nothing. In 1955, Barry, Robin, and Morris put together their very first band called the Rattlesnakes. It wasn't glamorous. They were still schoolboys, just borrowing instruments and teaching themselves chords. But that's where they first realized that when their voices came together, something different happened. It wasn't just three kids singing in harmony. It was something fuller, something that caught people's attention even in the roughest little venues. Not long after, their parents made the huge decision to leave Manchester behind and move the family to Australia. Like so many families at the time, they were chasing a better life and more opportunities. For the boys, the move opened up new stages, even if they weren't traditional ones. They used to sing between races at a local speedway, performing for crowds that came for the engines and stayed when they realized these young brothers could hold a tune. One of the people who noticed was a local radio DJ who, along with the speedway's owner, ended up giving them the name the world now knows, the Bee Gees, short for Brothers Gibb. By the time the brothers returned to England in 1967, they weren't the same kids anymore. They had sharpened their sound, learned how to handle an audience, and had songs that felt bigger than the pubs and halls they used to play. They landed under the wing of Robert Stigwood, the manager who also worked with Cream and later helped launch Andrew Lloyd Webber's musicals. Stigwood saw the same thing that fans would see, that the Bee Gees had a vocal blend that wasn't just tight, it was otherworldly. Barry's strong lead, Robin's emotional tremor, and Morris's balancing tone made for a sound that critics might have called sentimental. But for millions of fans, it became a lifeline. Of course, being brothers made the sound better, but it also made the working relationship harder. Robin sometimes felt pushed aside when Barry naturally stepped forward as the lead and primary songwriter. Morris, the peacemaker, often found himself playing referee when tempers flared. Their journey became a cycle: fights, reconciliations, and then another big hit that reminded them why they needed each other in the first place. And while that push and pull dynamic helped drive them to global fame, it also planted the first cracks in the foundation. They could win Grammys, sell millions of records, and become household names all around the world. But underneath it all, they were still brothers trying to navigate egos, ambition, and the weight of living up to their own success. That foundation would be tested in ways none of them could have predicted. And the first devastating blow didn't come from a chart battle or a bad review. It came in the most unexpected way, with a phone call in the early morning of March 10, 1988. Barry was at home in Miami when his manager called, his voice shaky and uneven, and the words that followed were the kind no brother ever wants to hear: "Andy's gone." Andy Gibb, the youngest of the Gibb brothers, had passed away just 5 days after turning 30 years old. The cause was myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle, which doctors believed was made worse by years of drug use and emotional struggles that Andy had never fully escaped. Now, Andy's story is different from his older brothers. He was 10 years younger, almost like a second generation in the same household. While Barry, Robin, and Morris were busy taking over the world as the Bee Gees, Andy was still the kid hanging around, soaking it all in, dreaming about the day he could follow in their footsteps. And Barry, being the oldest, made a promise that he would make Andy a star, the same way big brothers casually promised to fix a bike or help with homework. Only this time, Barry really delivered. In 1977, Barry produced Andy's debut single, "I Just Want to Be Your Everything." That song shot straight to #1, and for a while, Andy was not just keeping up with his brothers, he was ahead of them, with 3 #1 hits in a row in the United States. But here's the thing about Andy's rise. It was fast. It was flashy, and it was way more pressure than he was ready for. Being the younger Gibb came with huge expectations, and Andy often felt like he wasn't living up to the Bee Gees' name. To manage his stage fright and insecurities, he turned to cocaine, and before long, the habit began to control him instead of the other way around. His personal life became tabloid news, especially his relationship with Dallas star Victoria Principal. For a while, they were a glamorous couple, but when she gave him an ultimatum, choose between her or the drugs, Andy just couldn't let go of the addiction. The breakup hit him hard, and he admitted later in interviews that he was spending thousands of dollars a day on cocaine, shutting himself away in his room for weeks at a time. Barry tried to step in. In 1987, he flew to Los Angeles to pull Andy out of his downward spiral. There's a story of them at a hotel, shouting at each other in the hallway in the middle of the night. Andy, shirtless and shaking, kept promising that tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow never really came. Barry would later say that one of his biggest regrets was that his last conversation with Andy wasn't a loving one. It was an argument. When Andy passed away, the loss devastated the entire family. Barry once described it as feeling like the sky had been unplugged, like something vital had been taken away from them. Their father, Hugh, took it especially hard and passed away not long after, which Barry believed was the result of heartbreak more than anything else. For Barry, going back into the studio felt impossible. When he finally did return, he brought one of Andy's guitar picks and kept it on the mixing console as a way to feel like his brother was still part of the music. It was a small comfort, but it couldn't protect him from what was still waiting down the road. Because as painful as losing Andy was, Barry had no idea that in the years ahead, he'd face another loss. One that would shake the very foundation of the Bee Gees itself. Morris Gibb was always the glue of the Bee Gees, the guy who kept everything from spinning out of control, even when egos flared and tensions ran high. He was funny in a dry, self-deprecating way, and he had this knack for making both Barry and Robin laugh at themselves just long enough to avoid a full-blown argument. That role wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't something fans ever saw, but inside the band, it was invaluable. So when Morris went into a Miami hospital on January 12, 2003, for what was supposed to be a simple procedure to fix a twisted intestine, no one expected that the routine would take a tragic turn. Complications arose almost immediately. Morris suffered cardiac arrest before the surgery could even start, and in less than 2 days, at the age of 53, he was gone. Barry and Robin were at his side, but the speed of it all left them reeling. Barry, who had always been the practical, go-getter sibling, reportedly got the news just minutes before rehearsal. He walked onto the stage, looked at the band, and said quietly, "We're done." That wasn't just a line. It was the moment the Bee Gees, as a touring and performing entity, effectively ended. There were no press releases or dramatic statements, just the empty echo of a group that had lost its center. Morris's absence changed everything. Barry and Robin, who had always relied on him to mediate their sometimes complicated relationship, began to drift apart. Barry later admitted that he and Morris hadn't been in perfect harmony at the time of his death, and that one unresolved argument haunted him. The last voicemail Morris left was simple and casual. "Call me back, big bro." Barry never got the chance to return that call. For months after, the recording studio became almost a museum of memory. The mixing board sat exactly where Morris had left them, dust gathering on the faders, untouched, like the room itself was holding its breath. Barry kept walking in, expecting Morris to stroll in, cracking one of his bad jokes and saying something to diffuse the tension. But the door never opened, and the sound of that familiar laugh never returned. Losing Morris was more than losing a brother. It was losing the part of the band that kept everything balanced. And while Barry would eventually return to music, the gap left by Morris was always felt in every note, every harmony, every quiet moment in the studio where the three of them used to work, argue, and laugh together. May the 20th, 2012, marked the day the last note of the Bee Gees' signature harmony faded.
Yes, incredibly hard, because we've never not been together. You know, it was really tough. The first year after the last brother passed, Robin, that was the most difficult period for me. And people have said, so you had a breakdown? And no, I didn't have a breakdown, actually. I just didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know how to be perceived.
Robin, after a long and grueling battle with cancer, slipped into a coma. Barry immediately flew to London to be at his brother's side, holding his hand, talking to him, and quietly singing the songs they had written together as kids in Manchester. These weren't just hits, they were memories, moments frozen in time, melodies that carried their childhood, their struggles, and their bond. For a fleeting moment, Robin stirred and whispered his final request: keep the songs alive. He passed away shortly after, at 62, leaving Barry as the only surviving brother and the keeper of a legacy that had shaped pop music for decades.
The pop music world has lost another giant figure. Robin Gibb of the Bee Gees died Sunday after a long battle.
The reality of being the last Gibb brother hit Barry in ways that were hard to explain. He told an interviewer in Australia that he still hears harmonies that aren't there, imagining Robin's voice calling from another room, a ghostly echo of their once inseparable voices. The year after Robin's death was particularly heavy. Touring, recording, or even sitting in a quiet room reminded him of what was gone. He felt directionless, struggling to figure out how to continue carrying not just the music, but the weight of the memories, the arguments, the laughter, and the small rituals that had defined their lives together.
That one day we would make it. I remember saying it to one of my first girlfriends at 14 years old.
If you ask Barry what it feels like to be the last Gibb brother, he might describe it as a kind of endless apology. An apology to the fans for the reunion tours that will never happen. An apology to Morris and Robin for outliving them. And maybe even an apology to himself for feeling anything other than gratitude for simply still being here. Life now follows a quiet, deliberate rhythm. He wakes up early in his Miami home, the sprawling estate he's owned for decades, swims to start the day, and sits with his old Gibson guitar to write music. By 5, he stops for family time, never missing it, because for him, routines are as much a way to anchor himself as they are a form of self-care. He's become hyper-aware of health, booking regular checkups, avoiding unnecessary risks, and no longer traveling alone. For Barry, surviving isn't about fear of dying, it's the worry of leaving without saying the right goodbyes.
I think we were both afraid of each other. I knew where Barry was emotionally. I knew that his way of expressing himself was by not going forward, by not being a Bee Gee.
I wanted to keep the Bee Gees as the three of us. I wanted that.
On stage, the experience is different. The audience sees a legendary performer hitting all the nostalgic notes. But for Barry, the empty spaces are filled with memory. Every song carries weight. I Started a Joke makes him choke up, Robin's lead vocal forever imprinted in his mind. And the groove of Jive Talkin' is inseparable from Morris's signature bass lines. Performing these songs isn't just a show, it's a ritual, a promise kept, a way to honor them even when the pain is raw. Barry has also found ways to share these private tributes publicly. At one Hollywood Bowl concert, the stage lights dimmed mid-set, and footage of the brothers in their prime played on a giant screen as the orchestra accompanied To Love Somebody. Barry turned away from the crowd, shoulders shaking, lost in a moment of personal grief that the audience could only watch but never fully feel. Backstage, he described it as a confession rather than a performance. In 2019, he pushed that intimacy further with the album Greenfields, using old demo vocals to sing alongside Robin one last time, creating what he called the last conversation we never had. Being the last Gibb isn't easy, and Barry has said performing now is both lonely and bittersweet. But it's also necessary. It's how he keeps their music alive, how he keeps their voices echoing in the world, and how he carries forward a legacy built on brotherhood, harmonies, and a love that never truly leaves. If this story hit you somewhere tender, hit subscribe for more memories like this. Drop a comment telling us which Bee Gees lyric you still whisper when you need courage.